All right. Okay, so the live stream seems to be back for, at least as far as I can see from here, which was not good, but so if you want to tell anybody at home it's back, that would be fine. Yeah, at least it was back from the time you can walk from the back to the front. So. A moment ago. No telling what's going to happen again. So, but we are, like I said, we are trying to, I did record, I think, the first hour, so we'll see what happens after that. All right, so let's jump into the next part of this. This is where it's starting to get really good. Love this, what's happening next year. Genesis 43, starting in verse 24. So now we're going to see a incognito reunion from Joseph and his brothers. They're not going to ever recognize him until he reveals himself, which won't happen for another chapter and a half. But we're going to see this, what's going on here, and the brothers come into this elaborate, beautiful mansion, palace kind of house, and start to, again, be completely unsettled by what's happening to them. So the man, this would be Joseph's servant, brought the men into Joseph's house and gave them water, and they washed their feet, and gave their donkeys feed, and they made their present, all that nuts and grains and balms and all that, ready for Joseph at his coming at noon. For they heard that they would eat bread there. It's the very reason why they're there, is to get bread. And Joseph came home, and they brought him the present, which was in their hand, into the house, and bowed down before him to the earth. Then he asked them about their well-being and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" And they answered, "Your servant, our father, is in good health. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads down and prostrated themselves. Then he lifted his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your younger brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." Now his heart yearned for his brother. So Joseph made haste and sought somewhere to weep. And he went into his chamber and he wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and he restrained himself and said, "Serve the bread." So they set him a place by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat food with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked in astonishment at one another. Then he took servings to them from before him, but Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as any of theirs. So they drank and were merry with him. All right, so that's a short little section, but there's a lot going to start to unfold here. So the servant brings them into Joseph's house. He washes their feet, a very honoring custom. Men traveling, of course, to be in his house, it's good to wash their feet. But, that's that lowly servant doing that task. We see that with Jesus in the New Testament, and John 13 and all that. So he fed their donkeys, another nice service to the men, and prepared the presents, and they prepared the presents to give to Joseph as soon as he would arrive at noon. The brothers heard that he would eat bread with the governor in their house. They're learning what's going on. Now, this, again, based on how they were treated the last time they were here, however many months ago that was, this must have absolutely shocked them. We're in his house and he wants to eat bread with us. Okay. So they came to Egypt. They traveled that whole journey, 8, 9, 10 days, whatever it was, and they come expecting to be charged as spies and thieves unless they could prove to him that, no, that's not true of us. And they're invited into his house to have a meal with him. Okay. So instead of being received as malcontents, they were honored as special guests in the home of this man who ruled Egypt. Right? And of course, the shock of this unexpected treatment probably confused them. And so much so they probably couldn't actually enjoy it. You're washing our feet, we don't understand. You're feeding our donkeys, we don't understand. We're being brought in to eat lunch with the governor of the land in his palace, we don't understand. So it's just the constant, you can't enjoy it because they're just constantly trying to process, and they're always coming to the wrong conclusion about what's going on. So surely they were waiting, I believe, for this hammer to drop, as we would call it in our expression. Their good fortune surely was going to run its course, and they were surely going to start to see what his real plan for them was, to charge them as spies and to execute them, or maybe something a little less severe than that. So then Joseph comes in, and all his brothers, including now Benjamin, bow down and prostrate themselves before him, almost certainly trembling with fear, right? Oh, this man has all the power to take our lives from us, to refuse to sell us grain, to enslave us. They're just trembling with fear, and they are prostrated. You assume you know what that means, but laying down face to the ground, you're flat, flat, flat. You can't go any lower before this person of honor that's standing before them. Okay. So, and of course, in that position, you're always defenseless. How are you going to protect and defend yourself if you're laying face down to the ground? If he wants to chop off your head, he can chop off your head. That's the whole point of going prostrate before a ruler, is to say, I submit to your authority, chop off my head if that's your will, right? I mean, I'm not going to try and defend myself. Okay. So on the first trip, the 10 wicked brothers, that would be exchanging Benjamin for Simeon, bowed down to Joseph, fulfilling Joseph's dream, right? Now on the second trip, all the brothers, including their brother Benjamin, bowed down to Joseph. Okay? So now all of the sons have bowed down to Joseph, just as Joseph had told them, this is what's going to happen. I've had a dream that came from God, and you're all going to bow down to me. Okay? We're going to see eventually that the final fulfillment, where the sun and the moon and the stars also will come and bow down before and respect Joseph's position of authority and honor, eventually when Jacob finally makes his way. So we're seeing the fulfillment of dreams 21, whatever years earlier, being fulfilled right before Joseph in his house. And so all of that is, truly amazing, at least to Joseph. The brothers won't figure it out here for a little bit. So rather than harming them, chopping off their heads, imprisoning them, whatever else, okay, Joseph begins to ask them about their not their fathers, he asks them, how are you guys doing? How's your well-being? In Hebrew, it's the word shalom. How's your peace? How's your shalom doing, right? And so he's asking them really about, we talked about that on a couple of different times, like Sunday mornings and stuff. Like, you're really asking them, I want to know the whole of you, how are you doing? And he's asking them this. I can just imagine going, why do you care about how we're doing? I mean, it's one thing to actually allow us to buy grain from you, but to have genuine care of how we're doing? Shocking to these men. Okay. And then, of course, he asks them about their father. I know he's an old man. Is he still alive? And, of course, Joseph hopes that his father Jacob is still alive. And when they tell him he's actually alive and still doing quite healthy, despite his grief, okay, he's alive in good health for a man of his age, and he's well up there in age. So Joseph's in the house, and he turns his eyes towards Benjamin, who he's not seen now in 21 years, and Benjamin's the only one who has no culpability in selling him into Egypt, right? But he has to keep his identity still a secret now in the midst of, he sees his brother that he loves, but he can't let the ruse run its course yet, or come to an end yet, and so he has to kind of protect himself from his emotions about seeing his youngest son or brother, and certainly the brother of his own mother in Benjamin. So Joseph directly speaks to Benjamin and said, God be gracious to you, my son. Now this is the first in many steps that Joseph is going to do to intentionally favor Benjamin in the very eyesight of his 10 brothers. Okay, he's intentionally elevating Benjamin. He wants to rile up any sense of envy and bitterness and hatred against his youngest brother. Okay, to see what's in their hearts. He wants to know what's in their hearts. So the first thing, he doesn't ask the other 10, how you doing, or God be gracious to you. Benjamin, he says, God be gracious to me, my son. And here's Reuben and Levi and Simeon and the older brothers going, well, we're the older ones, what about us? He's intentionally lighting a fuse to see if it actually burns or if it extinguishes in the midst of all of this. Okay. And of course, he says in the text, his heart yearned to embrace his brother, but he can't do so. So his time is not available for him to do that. He's still got to go through with this testing procedure of the 10 brothers. Therefore, it says Joseph hurried into his own private chamber, and he weeps for a bit out of their sight, washes himself up, and he returns to having regained his composure, and he returns to having this meal set before them. And of course, the seating assignments should have been more big clues that something really unusual is taking place here in all of this. So Joseph has to eat alone at his own table. First off, he's the authority over Egypt, but he's also a Hebrew, so his servants don't eat with him. They're servants and they're Egyptian, and they couldn't eat with the brothers, so because that would be considered an abomination. Egyptians don't eat with Hebrews. So you got 3 tables set up. Joseph all by himself, the servants allowed to eat in the meal in the house all by themselves, and then of course the 11 brothers seated at a table. He's got a big house. And he's got all these servants, or his brothers, set up at a table by themselves. And so this must have been confusing detail to these 11 brothers. First off, why would such a powerful man have to sit all by himself? Why is he not included in the Egyptian sort of ranking system here? Okay. But then even more so, the 11 brothers are seated each according to, as it says, to their age and their birthright. Now, I think that means exactly what you think it means, but that extra phrase, their age and their birthright, leaves me one question. If Joseph had presumed that Reuben had lost his birthright through a forfeiture with Bilhah, then he may have seated him in some different position reflective of that sin that he committed. Now, more than likely, he actually sat them according to their actual birth order. But if Reuben was placed out of order, you can imagine the double shock. He knows that Reuben has lost favor with Dad. How's that possible? Okay. But even just seating them in their birth orders, like these are men in their 40s or whatever, how can you quite tell who's the oldest and who's the youngest? They probably don't look all that different by this time. So they're shocked. This man knows their birth order. So regardless of the details, they're astonished at what had just happened to them, all of it, all these things that are happening to them, but they still are not suspecting that it's their brother who is orchestrating everything that's happening in their life. Right? We sold him as a slave. He can't possibly be the governor of Egypt. Right? They're not expecting that. They have that would be, if you ask them at this time, I think the last thing on their mind would be, Joseph is pulling all the strings here. Right? The last thing on their mind. So Benjamin's portion, now again, we're accelerating. He's lighting this fuse, trying to get his brothers the height of jealousy against this, what he knows to be the now favorite son of their father. He is magnifying, intensifying, lighting a fuse so that they keep seeing, why is Benjamin the favored son? Why is Benjamin favorite? Why is Benjamin favorite? Because Joseph was the favorite, and they hated him for it. And so he's trying to see, will they hate my brother just because he's favorite? Okay, so that's this whole process that's starting to reveal itself in Joseph's testing of them. So the favor shown to Benjamin, I believe, is the clear heart of the test that Joseph is bringing to his brothers. Okay, would these 10 brothers hate and despise Benjamin because he's been shown privilege and honor above them? Okay. That would truly reveal their heart. Just including him as an equal is one thing. But being able to accept without hatred that this favored son of their father is being treated favorably by everybody around them is intended to test their hearts. Okay. So Joseph intended to set Benjamin up. Now we're going to see he's going to set him up to be falsely accused. And then with what we'll see in a moment, with the hiding Pharaoh or Joseph's cup in his bag and all that, he's going to set him up to be falsely accused, and then potentially let the 10 brothers profit if Benjamin, the favored son, is incarcerated. He's going to set this whole thing up. Do you want him incarcerated, or are you actually going to plead for his safety and innocence? This is all part of the big test. Okay. But despite all of these unusual events that have occurred, once a meal was served, they kind of let their guard down. And it says in the text that everyone drank and was merry. They're kind of inebriated, right? And they're enjoying this hosting of the governor. And throughout the entire process, they still don't know who he is. Okay. So they at least finished the day with kind of merry hearts. Hey, he didn't cut our heads off. Hey, he didn't enslave us. We got to eat the meal, all 11 brothers back together at once. And so their hearts are merry for a bit. And that's how they're going to leave this encounter. Hearts merry, having received the grain and all that they need to get back home. And their brother Simeon and their brother Benjamin are both safe and in their charge. But Joseph's not done testing them. So chapter 44, verse 1. And Joseph commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, just like before. Also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest and his grain money. So he, the servant, did according to the word of Joseph as he had spoken. And as soon as morning had dawned, the men, the 11 brothers, were sent away, they and their donkeys. And when they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to his steward, get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and with which he indeed practices divination? You have done evil in so doing. So he overtook them, and he spoke these same words to them. And they said to him, why does my Lord say these words? Far be it for us that your servants should do such a thing. Look, we have brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which was found in the mouths of our sacks. How could we then steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? With whomever your servants it is found, let him die, and we also be my Lord's slaves. And he said, now let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and you shall be blameless. So he didn't exactly repeat back what they said. Then each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each one opened his sack. And he searched, and he began with the oldest, and left off with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. And they tore their clothes. Each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city. So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, what deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? Then Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? And what shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and he also with whom the cup was found. But he said, far be it for me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. And as for you, go up in peace to your father. All right, so this is getting towards that great big event of seeing really the results of the test, not just the test. Joseph is going to see the results of the test that he has been setting up for probably around a year. So once they conclude the meal, Joseph allows the brothers to return to their business. They're going to buy the grain. They leave this house. They buy the grain. They kind of sleep for the night wherever they can sleep. And the brothers were released to go to their donkeys. And as much grain as they could possibly carry, he loaded them up to take back home for the maximum provisions that they would need. So despite all that happened that day before, okay, they were expecting to return to Jacob with a completely different experience than the last time they came back from Egypt. Okay. So that was their expectation. Wow, we made it through the meal. We got all the grain. We're headed back home, 11 brothers in full, right? Full count. But, of course, in the middle of this, unbeknownst to them, Joseph instructs his servants, well, first to provide them the maximum amount of grain they could carry, but he then tells them to return all their money back to their sacks, just as they had done on the first visit. But he also instructs his servants to place his silver cup into Benjamin's sack as a test for the 10 brothers. It's not a test of Benjamin. It's a test of his 10 oldest brothers. Okay, the brothers are older than both him and Benjamin. So then morning dawns, and the men travel out, and they got more than they even came for on their first journey. They got they retained Benjamin's freedom, which was, of course, everyone's primary concern, because Dad would not be in any way in good condition if Benjamin was left behind. Okay. They also had freed Simeon, who had been in prison for months, or however long he's been in prison since their last trip. And they were given as much grain as they could possibly haul back home logistically back into Canaan. So they got more than they thought they would ever come back home with. Okay. But once they're a short way off out of the city, Joseph's servant is instructed to return and pursue the brothers, ostensibly, the ruse is still in play, to search for Joseph's cup among his brethren. So the servant does so with this message, and he repeats the message from the governor. Why are you repaying evil for good? Well, that's what they did the first time. Joseph was he brought the proper report back to their father what they were doing. Joseph was doing good things, and Joseph's dream even had to do with their own livelihood and safety eventually. They're repaying evil for good. They did it 21 or whatever years earlier, and he's accusing them of doing the same thing again. So this missing cup was presumed to be a cup used by the governor for his divinations. They don't know that he's Hebrew. They don't know that he serves the one living God. And so he's, playing along with what they would expect. That an Egyptian man would most certainly have a cup of divination. So this crime was declared as evil. You don't separate a man from his devotion to his God. This is an evil thing to do. It's one of the heights of evil. A man has a duty and obligation to worship his God, and you've just robbed the governor of Egypt his ability to worship his God. That's what he's accusing them of. Okay. So without a doubt, the 10 brothers, Benjamin doesn't know, but the 10 brothers were again in another crisis. Oh boy, we're in another crisis. Okay. Now, what do you do? Could they possibly go home without Benjamin? I mean, the servant said, don't worry about it. You guys are free. Benjamin has to come back and be a servant. Could these 10 sons, 10 brothers, go back home and tell Dad, we all made it home, but Benjamin's lost? Okay. Now, so it's the wicked hearts of these men that, 2 decades later, they would have done that. They would have done that gleefully. Dad loves Benjamin. Benjamin gets all the benefits. Benjamin gets all the good stuff. The governor of Egypt just gave us a perfect excuse to get rid of this favored son. Okay? They certainly would have done it 21 years earlier. They did it to Joseph. Why not do it to Benjamin? So the servant, of course, overtakes the brothers, and he tells them the words. And the brothers all deny any intentional wrongdoing, and they didn't. They didn't do anything intentionally wrong in their treatment and their encounters with Joseph. And they try to remind the servant, look, we've done everything very honorably. We've gone above and beyond to try and show you that we're men of integrity, men of honor, men of honesty. And so we gave your master gifts, and we paid for the grain. And why would we go back now and put our lives at risk by stealing from his house? Right? They're trying to be rational and reasonable with the whole thing. And they confidently, they don't know where the cup is. They have no idea if anybody has the cup or doesn't have the cup. So they confidently challenge the servant. Look, you go ahead and search our sacks. Our hearts tell us we're innocent. You search the sacks. And if you find your master's cup in the sack, just kill one of us, whoever has it, because, hey, we know we're innocent. Nobody stole from your master. Okay?
So then again, the servant uses the birth order pattern to search the sacks, building tension, building anticipation, right? He's and they're probably going, whew, Reuben didn't have it, whew, Simeon didn't have it, Levi didn't have it, we're getting good, we're all there, all the way down to Benjamin. And then he finds the cup in Benjamin's sack. Okay. So the discovery of the cup with Benjamin then grieves the brothers, okay? Not like they would have been 21 years earlier. They're grieved is shown by they tore their clothes. They are absolutely, that's the classic Hebraic way of expressing grief. They tear their clothes. They are absolutely beside themselves in grief that Benjamin is now being accused of a crime that will cost him at least his life into slavery, if not worse. And they even told him to kill him if the cup was found in his sack. Now they're in real trouble. Okay. So rather than letting Benjamin fend for himself, all 11 brothers return back to the city, and they are hoping to find a rational, reasonable person in the governor to explain why this crime was not really something they were guilty of. Okay. But Joseph, of course, is continuing his ruse. He doesn't know their hearts yet. He hasn't actually seen it revealed. So he continues this ruse, and he asks his brothers why they thought that he shouldn't need his cup for divination. I don't believe Joseph was actually using a cup for divination, because he's a man of God, but it's the ruse. He had this cup, and they still think he's Egyptian or some kind of pagan, and certainly not their brother, and so it's all part of the ruse. So he has this cup he's not using, he sends it along and has it put in Benjamin's sack. But Benjamin is in the crosshairs, and Judah steps forward now again as the spokesman of the family. We keep seeing the same thing. Now he put himself as a surety under his father, and so he's now stepping forward to have a conversation with Joseph. Now remember, the reason Joseph's in Egypt is because Judah said, hey, why don't we sell him to the Midianites? So now the person responsible for him going to Egypt is the person negotiating with him for the protection or the safety of his brother. Okay. So Judah declared that while they did not do anything intentionally to take the cup, he tells them that God is using all these events that are happening to us that we have no control over, okay, to expose the former iniquities that we did in our hearts concerning Joseph, the very man they're speaking to, or Judah is speaking to, but they have no idea who it is. They're basically confessing their sins. We made a grievous choice 21 years earlier against our brother, and while you have nothing to do with all this in their minds, God is judging us, and that's why this cup was found in our brother's sack. Okay, that's a true explanation of how this thing happened. God wants to convict us, the 10 brothers, not Benjamin, of a wickedness that we have done. So he then offers to have all the brothers become slaves in order to spare their brother Benjamin from execution. Look, we'd rather be slaves in Egypt than all 10 of us go home free and have Benjamin be executed. That's it. That's got to be preferable. So they're basically giving up their freedom, giving up their lives in exchange for their one brother, who happens to be dad's favorite, who happens to have been shown great favoritism by this governor over Egypt. Okay. So Joseph, hearing this offer, rejected Judah in allowing all 11 brothers to become slaves. Okay. He says, the 10 brothers, you're free to leave. But Benjamin must become my slave because the cup was found in his sack. The rest should return to their father in peace. Tension being built up here, right? This is the test that God has, I believe, instructed Joseph to go through. Not so much, God doesn't need to know. And Joseph needs to know some, but I think really the brothers needed to know what was in their heart 2 decades after they had committed a wickedness against a family member, their youngest brother or second youngest brother at the time. Okay, so let's finish off what's happening here and see lead us up towards the big reveal. Okay. So in chapter 44, verse 18, then Judah came near to him and said, "Oh my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's hearing, and do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh." My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age, who is young. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children. And his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes upon him. And we said to my Lord, the lad cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. So it was when he went up to your servant, my father, that we told him the words of my Lord. And our father said, go back and buy us a little food. But we said, we cannot go down. If our youngest brother is with us, then we will go down. For we may not see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. And the one went out from me, and I said, surely he is torn to pieces. And I have not seen him since. But if you take this one also from me, and calamity befalls him, you shall bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. Now therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and when the lad is not with us, since his life is bound up in the lad's life, it will happen, when he sees that the lad is not with us, that he will die. So your servants will bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, with sorrow to the grave. For your servant became a surety for the lad to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame for my father before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? Judah is interceding, personally putting his life on the line for his brother, that by all rights, if he was still the same man he once was, he would hate. Okay. So Judah, we're seeing him intercede specifically for Benjamin. So Judah, we'll go through all the narrative here, but Judah requested that his appeal be heard by the governor, so he's willing to step in, put his life on the line, even to have a conversation. This is not like going to the drugstore and saying, I want to return this item, right? This is going to the governor land. Man, they should primarily have no access to, but he asked to have a voice, an audience with the governor once again to talk about the situation. And of course, Judah honors Joseph. He says, you're the ruler of Egypt. You're basically like Pharaoh, or one step down from Pharaoh. And you're right to be angry, but please hear this appeal on behalf of my brother Benjamin. So Judah then fully recounts, of course, all the events of the situation, kind of blaming Joseph, the governor, for the fact that they had to bring Benjamin there in the first place. He said, Benjamin didn't come on the first trip because he was the final son of their father in his old age and the only remaining son of his beloved wife. But Benjamin was brought on this trip because you demanded it, governor. Okay? If they had not brought him, then the family would not have been able to purchase grain for survival. You put us in this catch-22. We couldn't buy grain unless Benjamin came. Benjamin is so important to my father. We wanted to keep him protected at home. But we wouldn't survive as a family if you didn't provide us grain. We had to bring him. So we're caught in this catch-22 situation. Will you be reasonable and help us get out of it? Okay, and not kill our father in the process by having grief of lost his second son. So if they had not brought him, the family would not have been able to survive the grain. But of course, if they lose their brother, their father would die. So and of course they wouldn't get Simeon back if they had never made the journey the second time. And then Judah further explains that he had already placed himself as this surety to protect Benjamin, and clearly said, I will offer to take his place. If the governor needs a servant for the crime that was committed, I am that person to take that position as your servant. He also explained that if the news of Benjamin being executed or enslaved came back to their father, it was in their minds certain to bring him to death. So Judah considered his life and his freedom to be expendable to the overall good of his family, but Benjamin was loved too greatly and was not expendable. These are the very words Joseph is looking to hear as a result of the test that he has established. So, Judah shows himself to be willing to be a man of honor, placing both his father and his brother above his own life. His actions here are not born out of pride, envy, hatred. This is a different man, and this is a different set of brothers than Joseph last saw looking up from the pit as he was being traded to the Midianite, journeys. So Judah, and perhaps all the brothers, it seems to be consistent among the brothers, deeply regretted what they had done to Joseph. Joseph is seeing that regret. He's seeing that contrition. He's seeing that remorse that they are feeling that God has orchestrated all this that's happening to them. And it's not just we feel bad because God is punishing us. I think they truly feel bad about what they did to Joseph. It wasn't, life with Joseph wasn't as bad as we made it out to be 21 years ago. And now he's gone forever. We saw how that affected our father, and maybe we even miss him, but we don't have that same, we hate him and therefore we're still glad he's dead kind of attitude. Okay. So, if the brothers failed Joseph's test, I'm asking myself some speculations again here. Okay, what if they failed the test? If they came back and said, "Oh yeah, that's great. You take Benjamin, and we're even a better family for it," right? If they had failed his test, okay, I believe Joseph, would have rescued. One option is he rescued Benjamin from this. Like, you don't want to suffer the same fate I was. They hated me and they sold me. They were going to kill me. So I'm going to rescue my brother from these 10 wicked brothers. They're still wicked as they were. I'm going to rescue him. I'm going to call him a slave in Egypt, and as soon as they go home, I'm going to tell him who I really am, and I'm going to set him up as my second in charge, or, I'm going to do something to keep my brother safe from these wicked 10 brothers that I have. And he may have also decided to punish them. Like, they failed the test, you sold me, I'm going to imprison you, I'm going to enslave you, or I'm going to kill you. You have obviously unchanged, unrepentant hearts after these 2 decades of having sold me into slavery. Okay? Or maybe he would have made plans to reunite with his father Jacob in some other manner apart from this whole events that would take place. But, of course, fortunately, they passed the test. Okay? And so Joseph could be reunited once he reveals himself to them. And so that's what he's going to do. And we're not covering that tonight. We'll get that to the next lesson. But again, this is what I saw in studying for this again is how every detail of what Joseph set up with the encounters with his brothers was intended to test them, intended to make them, if they had hatred in their heart for Benjamin, he was going to magnify it as big as it could possibly be, and then give them a way to just let the circumstances run their course and let Benjamin, hang in the wind with their own hatred of him. And they're like, hey, we didn't have anything to do with Benjamin not coming home and Benjamin not being in the family, right? But no, here's Judah stepping in and saying, his life is important, my life is expendable. I will easily, willingly substitute my life for my brother. Joseph thinking that good thought about these 10 brothers who threw him into a pit, pulled him out, sold him to Midianite traders. He spent time in Potiphar's house and got falsely accused. He spent time in prison and was left there to just rot and die, even though he was in charge of the prison. And then he gets exalted by God's own provision up to the highest position possible in the land under Pharaoh. And the brothers come back and he's looking to see their hearts. And you can say, well, why don't you just ask them? How are you going to know their hearts if you just say, hey, you guys still hate me the way you used to 10 years ago, 20 years ago? No, he's testing them to see. And so every event, the giving Benjamin a 5-fold portion of the food and giving him favor and honor where he wasn't giving that same favor and honor with the others, and then setting it up. So here's Benjamin getting himself in deep, deep, deep trouble. And it's like, well, that was easy. We didn't even have to do anything weird to get rid of Benjamin. But Benjamin was considered by all 10 brothers to be exceedingly important to Dad and the family, and therefore it was exposed through Judah's leadership. We want to rescue our brother from these events and from this unreasonable governor in the land. And so they passed the test. What we see as the next chapter opens is Joseph says, "Hey guys, I'm your brother." And they're like, "That's not possible." Right? We're going to see how they respond to all that. And unfortunately, we'll as we finish off the book of Genesis, Joseph honors and respects and trusts them going forward. They never trust Joseph to not be a man seeking retribution, especially after their father Jacob dies. Okay. But we'll see how that all plays out in the end. But this is fantastic. And like I said, I always knew it was a test. I didn't really see how every element of it was intended to magnify their hearts, whether they were good or evil, and then let their decisions play their course until he saw how they would respond to it all. Yeah.
It shows that they had more love and respect for their dad.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want anything to happen to it. And then he even says, the father is deeply loves the son.
Yeah.
And so, to me, it shows that they had learned to accept that he loved them too, but there was a special love there
Yeah.
between him and his son.
Yeah, right. So if you're not hearing that, or people online, so talking about how it even demonstrates how the brothers loved and honored, respected the well-being of their father, because they didn't want to see anything bad happen to him, whereas certainly when they sold Joseph, they didn't care how their father responded to that. They just wanted Joseph dead. They wanted him out of their lives. And so now they care about their father, they care about their brothers, they care about their family, and they begin to recognize we need each other. And so we don't even know how their hearts were fully transformed. We don't see that transition actually taking place while Judah was, sleeping with Tamar, and, Reuben was sleeping with his father's concubine. We don't see their change of hearts, but something occurred in these men, seemingly all of them, to recognize God has all knowledge of what we did. God wants us restored, and I believe their hearts were grieved to see daily their father Jacob mourning the loss of Joseph. And like, wow, we had no idea. We thought it might last a month or 6 months, but 20 years and he's still grieving? That's awful. And we feel bad that our father is suffering in this way, and we can't fix it because we don't know how. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll call it a night. Thanks, everybody. Glad you were able to make it. Thanks.